Voin absolutely burst onto the scene with some of the best hack and slash gameplay we've been graced with in a long damn time. Developed by one very ambitious guy with a clear penchant for implementing new and inventive ways to slay your enemies, it is seriously chock-a-block with potential. It's been out in early access for coming up on a year with consistent communication from the dev, evidently working in earnest to deliver an indie game for the ages. And after around 8 hours, having found much of what there is to see, I think he's on the right track. Well, mostly anyways.
I am your master, and you are the pinnacle of my creation. Rise now, and serve me and the world. Rise now.
Voin is what you get when a game is developed by someone who plays games themselves. For better or worse, Nikita knows just what makes us tick. The way the character moves, unabated by the restrictions we've come to expect in these games, is evidence of that. He can't help but let us break the game in any way we can manage, and you know, I can respect it. Our protagonist, a man of few words currently, whom I think is called Lightning, correct me if I'm wrong, is essentially the avatar of a god, a storm made flesh and unleashed on a world ravaged by plague to cleanse it with not only fire, but anything else he can get his hands on. Fire, frost, poison, lightning, psychic damage, you name it, it's probably here, and all of it seems viable. There are a great many status effects to keep track of, but luckily they are not so crucial as to be overwhelming. It's not a tabletop rule set. If you don't want to read, you're probably going to do alright. If you do want to use that brain of yours, there's a world of build potential waiting for you here. You can combine the many unique effects of the weapons you'll discover with a freedom I wish more games elected to give me. It's truly awesome. A little bit of thought put into a build can make it preposterously powerful and an absolute joy to bully these poor enemies with. The trailers honestly don't do this game justice. I had watched them before and been interested, but a little hesitant. I didn't think the melee feedback and animation work was my thing. Boy, was I wrong. I fell into a mountain of oversized teddy bears worth of comfort immediately. Like, it took very little for me to feel right at home. Inputs are snappy and fast, but the weapons don't swing weightlessly. That's a real tough balance to get right. You want the player to feel in control, but running away with just that notion can net you combat that feels responsive but unsatisfying. On the other hand, you need friction. You want any choice made in the moment-to-moment gameplay to matter and to hold weight, figuratively and literally. He's struck a really solid balance here. Another thing to note is that skill expression is meaningful here, and let me elevate the experience beyond the moment all the standard stuff clicked for me. Sure, I can just hack away and make sure to time my dodges and parries, but I can also do spins, and I look really cool when I do spins. It's a good trick. The combat is simple in any explanation I can give, but it's layered with a ton of emergent depth, if you get what I mean. It's what I'll call it anyway. You can avoid most attacks by dodging or holding the block button, but you'll want to time your parries and dodges to give you an advantage. Perfect dodges having equipable effects tied to them, like leaving frozen versions of yourself behind that shatter and do damage when hit. A thing I absolutely love about the parries, and a thing that was surely necessary, is that they don't only stagger the enemy you parried. They stagger everything within a pretty generous radius. In some games, trying to parry when fighting big groups just leads to you getting your ass beat, and here it's recommended and really adds to the power fantasy when you're in a sticky situation. I alluded to the movement being fantastic earlier. I'll expand a bit. With your weapon sheathed, you're able to use a sort of super dash that rockets you much further than a normal one. And as long as you have enough juice in the tank and it recharges pretty quick, you can just about fly. Especially with the right item combinations, I decided I'd see how far I could take it, and pretty soon I was reaching places I don't think Nikita intended for me to reach. I was also able to traverse these levels in a way that they surprisingly catered to. Verticality wasn't an afterthought, which I found really nice. While I could technically manage to skip 90% of each level, you need the ichor you collect from killing enemies to even begin to craft these amazing builds. That, and they'll occasionally drop new weapons and items for you. Those that are duplicates will upgrade the weapon it matches automatically, which is a nice touch as well. I always hated to find a new fancy weapon later in the game and not have nearly enough resources to make it useful. Here that was never really a problem. While the levels you get from duplicates don't do it all, and Ica is still the primary driver of your upgrades, it seemed to me that it was pretty balanced and designed in a way that really allows you to experiment. There is truly very little to limit these experiments. A ton of great effects, like one that summons bells on a heavy attack that you can whack to damage enemies around it, or a weapon that creates tears in reality that emanate a frost aura, or as the dev himself says,
or should I say, a cool aura. No, I shouldn't say that.
You can combine all of these effects and create the perfect weapon. It's really great stuff. I love the one that guaranteed a critical hit if you timed your heavy attacks correctly. Piling a bunch of crit related effects on top of that was a fun way to rip through these enemies, which themselves are quite varied and enjoyable to fight. There are the standard grunts that throw themselves at you, but the enemies progressively get fiercer and more complicated. I initially hated the enemy that shot these big homing orbs at me because I was stubborn in trying to dodge them, until I realized they'd disappear if I parried them. It became a nice challenge to be aware that one solution doesn't always fit all. They look great as well and are quintessentially dark fantasy. Can we talk about how everything looks here? Because I bloody adore it. You can customize the visuals to your liking, whether you prefer it to be a little retro and pixelized or more modern but still very stylized. Maybe you don't like the stop motion animations of distant enemies, you can turn that off too. Whatever the choice, it looks awesome. It's low poly and its textures are low res but very thoughtful. Some great seemingly Elden Ring inspired framing and design here. I'd play a big budget action RPG with this style in a heartbeat. It's a shame that those with less reach and money in their pockets are the only ones that see the value of subduing the need for realism and just making a game look and run well. And it runs great here. Now, I might just be stupid, but the UI was a tad confusing. There are loads of numbers and different names for things, and I'm not quite sure the game did the greatest job explaining it. But all is subject to change, and also it looks really bloody cool, so I forgive it. For what was the better part of my experience, the levels didn't only look gorgeous, but they played pretty gorgeous too. I found loads of hidden chests and some cool secret bosses, which I'm sure will come in droves as this game gets nearer to its 1.0 release. I was almost always rewarded for exploration, be it the chests I mentioned or these little dudes called soul fruits. Soul fruits are actually a really creative take on the skill tree. There is a literal tree in this game, but they function quite a bit different. You'll gain skill points as you play, but instead of unlocking things the traditional way, the stone fruits will vary in point cost and you'll have to allocate them thoughtfully to get what you want out of the system. It's also not traditional in the sense that you won't want many of these skills, quote, end quote. Some of them are pretty risky. Okay, so I wanted to front load this review with what I really loved about Voin, and for 5 to 6 of the 8 hours I played, I was really loving it. Truly, I mean that. I'd also like to preface by reminding you that this game is deep in early access and could very well address everything I'm about to say. I'm aware that it was always the intention of the developer to expand on the questing side of things to deepen the experience. To be clear, there isn't a whole lot to talk about here in the first 2 levels, as questing is hardly present. If you didn't get the message, I really enjoyed them. But the 3rd level, the permafrost level, is where it starts to feel a little unfocused. As I said, I'm aware of the intention, but it still feels like scope creep to me. This level is big. I mean, big, like open world big, and admittedly it is visually stunning. However, and I know this is harsh, I think almost everything almost immediately got worse. Voin loses its verticality. This place is flat and landmarks are needlessly sparse. What was a joy to traverse became a real chore, and it was sad to see it happen so suddenly. The main objective here is to collect 5 Hearts of the Blizzard so you can kill the Ice King or whatever, which are nestled deep in these ever-raging storms, placed in really insignificant feeling locations around this bloody monster of a map. Finding them takes longer than it should, and there isn't a whole lot to keep you interested in what is a very padded and glorified fetch quest. Voin loses its variety. Enemies are less thoughtfully designed, less smartly placed. They'll often come hurtling from the sky in meteors because even the developer knew it wouldn't make sense for them to be standing out here in the middle of nowhere. The landscape and its landmarks are noticeably homogeneous. Everything looks too similar to feel interesting to explore. What did end up catching my eye almost always brought more barren land for me to trek across in search of something worth my time. Voin introduced a new mystery system, which is really only mysterious in name. For example, I came across a cute looking town infested with some enemies. I didn't find a whole lot there, so I left, but on checking my journal, I found out that it was a mystery. I flew straight on back, thinking there was much more than meets the eye, but all I had to do was destroy these ichor growths littered around, and all I got was a bit of loot and some flavor text. There wasn't a whole lot of mystery, and the same thing can be said for the other two I stumbled across. Voin loses its way. The game was surely succeeding in everything it set out to do before this very level. I was more than happy to keep on playing. In fact, I did play for hours and hours straight. I shit you not, the 8 hours I played were straight. I don't say this lightly, but permafrost tore everything I loved about this game away from me and is an unfortunate marker of a really talented developer losing his way a little bit. I want to be so very clear here. So I will make certain you know I loved the better part of my time with this game, and I'm still very, very, very excited for the future. I apologize if any of this sounds too harsh. I mean what I say, and I'm just worried for the future of what I think was aimed straight at the Hall of Fame beforehand. Because I did have a good time, and I still have hope that the developer will pivot back from what makes Voin so fantastic. I tentatively recommend you give it a shot, and I definitely think you should keep your eye on it. Thanks!